Emma was 23 years old when she started shopping for her first car in 2015. Was a newly qualified teacher in Manchester, making £22,000 a year, and she needed something reliable to get to work. Her budget was tight around £10,000, but that was fine because the market was full of options. She could choose between a brand new Dacia Sandero for £7,995, a Ford Fiesta for £9,795, or a Vauxhall Corsa for £9,995. There were literally dozens of new cars available under £12,000. She eventually bought the Fiesta, loved it, and life went on. Fast forward to 2024. Emma's younger sister, Katie, just qualified as a teacher. She's making £28,000 more than Emma started on Anne. She needs her first car. She sits down with the same £10,000 budget her sister had, adjusting for her slightly better salary. She goes online to look at new cars under £12,000 and finds almost nothing. The Dacia Sandero now starts at £14,995. The Ford Fiesta? Discontinued. Gone. Doesn't exist anymore. The Vauxhall Corsa starts at £21,000. Katie scrolls through manufacturer websites in disbelief. Nearly every affordable model her sister could choose from has either disappeared entirely or doubled in price. The cheapest new car she can actually find is still that Dacia, and even that's 88% more expensive than it was 9 years ago. Katie asks Emma, "What happened? Where did all the cheap cars go?" Emma doesn't have an answer. Nobody does, or at least nobody wants to admit the truth. Because what happened to affordable cars wasn't an accident. It wasn't inflation. It wasn't supply chain issues or market forces. It was deliberate. Car companies systematically killed budget cars, and they did it because poor people aren't profitable. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how they did it, why they did it, and why those cars are never coming back. Let's establish the scale of what's been lost. In 2010, there were 43 different new car models available in the UK for under £12,000. By 2015, that number had dropped to 28. By 2020, it was 12. Today, in 2025, there are exactly four models: the Dacia Sandero, the MG3, the Citroën C3, and the Fiat Panda. And even these start at £14,000 to £16,000, which is well above that £12,000 threshold when you adjust for inflation from 2010. The entire bottom tier of the automotive market has been systematically eliminated. In America, the situation is even more extreme. In 2015, you could buy 11 different new sedans for under $20,000. Today, there are two: the Nissan Versa and the Mitsubishi Mirage, and even those are being phased out. Ford doesn't make a single sedan anymore except the Mustang. They killed the Focus, the Fiesta, the Fusion, everything. Chevrolet discontinued the Cruze and the Sonic. Honda stopped making the Fit. Toyota doesn't sell the Yaris in America anymore. An entire category of vehicles has been erased from existence, and this wasn't gradual decline. This was coordinated elimination. Between 2017 and 2023, car manufacturers collectively discontinued over 60 different affordable car models across North America and Europe. That's roughly one model being killed every month for 6 years straight. These weren't unpopular cars. The Ford Fiesta was Britain's best-selling car for years. The Focus was a global bestseller. These were vehicles that millions of people bought and loved, and they were systematically executed. So why? Why would car companies deliberately kill their most popular, highest volume products? The answer is brutally simple: profit margins. According to data from the Center for Automotive Research, the average profit margin on a budget car sold in 2019 was between 2 to 4%. That means for every £10,000 car sold, the manufacturer made £200 to £400 profit. After years of development, engineering, marketing, distribution, everything, they cleared £300. Now compare that to an SUV or pickup truck. The average profit margin on those vehicles is 15 to 20%. A £35,000 SUV generates £5,250 to £7,000 in profit. That's 15 to 20 times more money for the manufacturer. But it's even more stark when you look at specific examples. General Motors CFO admitted in a 2019 investor call that they made approximately $300 profit on each Chevrolet Cruze sedan they sold. Meanwhile, they made $17,000 profit on each Chevrolet Tahoe SUV. That's 56 times more profit. Ford's CEO Jim Farley stated in 2020 that the company made minimal profit or lost money on small cars like the Fiesta and Focus, while F-Series trucks generated over $10,000 profit per vehicle. The financial incentive to kill small cars was overwhelming. And here's the thing. This wasn't a secret. Automotive industry analysts had been warning about this for years. A 2016 report from McKinsey & Company, titled "The Future of Mobility," explicitly stated that manufacturers will increasingly focus on high-margin segments and discontinue low-profit vehicles. They saw it coming. They told us it was coming, and then it happened exactly as predicted. But car companies had a problem. They couldn't just suddenly stop making affordable cars. That would be commercial suicide. People would revolt. Politicians would intervene. So they needed cover, and they got it from three convenient crises that allowed them to do what they always wanted to do. The 2020 pandemic, the semiconductor shortage, and the electric vehicle transition. These three events gave manufacturers the perfect excuse to permanently restructure the market. When COVID hit and factories shut down, production of all vehicles dropped. But when factories reopened, manufacturers had to make choices about what to produce with limited capacity, and they made a very specific choice. They prioritized high-margin vehicles. Internal documents leaked from Ford showed that when chip supplies were constrained, the company explicitly directed chips toward F-150 trucks and away from small cars. BMW did the same, prioritizing X5s, UVs over 3 Series sedans. This wasn't accidental, it was strategic resource allocation. A 2021 analysis by Automotive News revealed that during the chip shortage, production of vehicles priced under $25,000 fell by 42%, while production of vehicles priced over $50,000 fell by only 11%. The chip shortage was absolutely real, but it was being weaponized. Manufacturers used scarcity as an opportunity to permanently shift their product mix toward profitable vehicles, and customers, desperate for any car during the shortage, had no choice but to accept whatever was available. Then came the sales data that changed everything. In 2021 and 2022, despite producing fewer vehicles, automotive manufacturers reported record profits. Stellantis posted $18 billion in net profit in 2020. Won their highest. GM made $10 billion in 2021. Up from $6.4 billion in 2019, despite selling fewer vehicles. Ford's profit margins hit levels not seen in decades. They discovered something revolutionary. They could make more money by producing less, as long as what they produced was expensive. This is when the permanent transformation began. In investor calls throughout 2022 and 2023, automotive executives started using phrases like disciplined production, premiumization strategy, and portfolio optimization. These are corporate euphemisms for, "We're killing cheap cars forever." Ford's Jim Farley told investors in 2022 that the company was pursuing a value over volume strategy. Translation: we'd rather sell fewer expensive cars than many cheap ones. GM's Mary Barra was even more explicit. In a 2023 investor presentation, she stated that GM was exiting low-margin segments to focus on profitable growth. She literally announced they were abandoning poor people, and investors cheered. The stock price went up. Wall Street loved it, because Wall Street doesn't care if working-class families can afford cars. They care about quarterly earnings and profit margins. But manufacturers couldn't just say, "We don't want to make cars for poor people anymore." That would be terrible PR. So they developed a narrative. Blame regulations. Emission standards are too strict. Safety regulations make small cars impossible. Electric vehicle mandates force us to go premium. It's not our fault, it's the government's fault. And the media largely bought this narrative and repeated it uncritically. Here's the reality. Regulations didn't kill affordable cars. The Dacia Sandero exists. It meets all European safety standards and emissions regulations, and it still sells for under £15,000. MG makes cars that meet all regulations and sell for reasonable prices. It's not impossible, it's just less profitable. And given the choice between serving customers and serving shareholders, manufacturers chose shareholders every single time. Let's look at what they replaced budget cars with. Crossovers and SUVs. Between 2015 and 2024, while manufacturers killed 60 affordable car models, they launched over 100 new SUV and crossover models. The market didn't naturally shift toward SUVs. Manufacturers deliberately pushed customers in that direction by eliminating alternatives. If the only vehicles available are SUVs, of course, SUV sales increase. That's not consumer preference. That's manufactured consent. And here's the brilliant part of their strategy. They took the exact same platforms that used to underpin cheap sedans and turned them into slightly taller crossovers with bigger price tags. The Nissan Kicks is essentially a Versa hatchback on stilts, but it costs £4,000 more. The Ford Puma is basically a Fiesta in a different body, but Ford charges £7,000 more for it. Same engineering, same components, dramatically higher price. They discovered they could charge a premium simply by making cars slightly taller and calling them SUVs. Data from Jato Dynamics shows that the average transaction priced for a vehicle in the UK rose from £24,000 in 2015 to £36,400 in 2024. That's a 51% increase. Inflation over the same period was about 28%. That extra 23% isn't inflation, it's forced premiumization. Customers are being pushed into more expensive vehicles, not because they want them, but because affordable alternatives have been systematically eliminated. And manufacturers are making record profits from this strategy. But the impact on ordinary people has been devastating. The Resolution Foundation published research showing that car ownership among 25-35-year-olds in the UK has fallen from 62% in 2015 to 41% in 2024. That's a 21 percentage point drop in less than a decade. And it's not because young people don't want cars. Study after study shows they do. It's because they've been priced out. When the cheapest new car costs £15,000 and the average graduate earns £26,000, the math simply doesn't work. In the US, Cox Automotive found that the average new car payment hits $750 per month in 2024. For minimum wage workers, that's more than 40% of their pre-tax income. For young professionals, it's 25 to 30%. People are taking on 5, 6, 7-year loans just to afford basic transportation. Car debt in America has surpassed $1.6 trillion larger than credit card debt. This is a debt crisis manufactured by the deliberate elimination of affordable options. And the used car market offers no refuge because when new cars get expensive, used cars follow. Between 2020 and 2024, used car prices in the UK increased by an average of 42%. A 5-year-old Ford Focus that would have cost £8,000 in 2019 now costs £12,000 to £14,000. A 10-year-old Honda Civic with 80,000 miles costs £9,000 to £10,000. Even old, high-mileage cars that should be cheap are expensive because demand has been pushed entirely into the used market by the lack of affordable new options. This has created a bizarre situation where cars that should be nearly worthless are holding ridiculous value. 15-year-old vehicles with 120,000 miles are selling for £4,000 to £5,000. 20-year-old cars are still fetching £2,000 to £3,000. These are cars that in a normal market would be worth scrap value. But the market isn't normal anymore. It's been distorted by the intentional destruction of the affordable new car segment. Let's talk about the electric vehicle excuse, because this is where manufacturers have been particularly They claim that electrification requires premium pricing, that battery costs make cheap EVs impossible. TC's a lie. In China, companies like BYD are producing electric vehicles for $11,000 to $15,000. The BYD Seagull sells for $9,700 in China. The Wuling Hongwang Mini EV costs $4,500. These are real cars with real range that real people buy. They meet Chinese safety standards. They work perfectly fine, and they're extremely affordable. So why can't Western manufacturers do this? They can. They choose not to. Because cheap EVs would cannibalize their expensive EV sales. Tesla doesn't want to make a $25,000 EV. because it would hurt Model 3 sales. Mercedes doesn't want cheap electric cars because it would damage their premium brand image. Instead, Western manufacturers are lobbying for tariffs on Chinese EVs to keep them out of European and American markets. They're literally asking governments to block affordable cars from being sold to protect their ability to overcharge. The European Commission imposed provisional tariffs of up to 38% on Chinese electric vehicles in 2024. The stated reason was unfair subsidies, but the real reason is protecting European manufacturers from actual competition. If BYD could sell their $11,000 EVs in Europe for €12,000, it would destroy the premium pricing strategy of every European manufacturer. So they're using government power to maintain their oligopoly, and politicians are going along with it because automotive manufacturers are major employers and political donors. In the UK, the situation is particularly absurd. The government has mandated that by 2030, all new cars must be zero. But the cheapest viable electric car costs £30,000. The average UK household income is £32,300 before tax. So the government is mandating that people buy cars that cost more than their annual income. When you point out this obvious contradiction, you get vague promises about how prices will come down eventually, except they won't, because manufacturers have no incentive to reduce prices. Here's what really kills me. The technology exists to make cheap electric cars. Battery costs have fallen by 89% since 2010. Electric motors are simpler and cheaper than combustion engines. EVs have fewer parts, require less assembly, and should theoretically be cheaper to manufacture. The technology is there, the capability is there. The only thing missing is the will, because cheap EVs don't generate the profit margins that manufacturers want. Instead, we get $70,000 electric SUVs marketed as solutions to climate change. We get $100,000 electric trucks promoted as practical work vehicles. We get luxury EVs with massage seats and giant touch screens and every premium feature imaginable, all while manufacturers claim they're doing their part for sustainability. It's not about sustainability, it's about profit. If it were about sustainability, they'd be making affordable EVs that normal people could actually buy. The social impact of all this is profound and underreported. Transportation is not a luxury, it's a necessity for economic participation. People need cars to get to work, especially in areas with poor public transport. When cars become unaffordable, people's economic opportunities shrink. They can't accept jobs that require driving. They can't live in affordable areas outside city centers. Their children can't participate in activities that require transportation. Entire communities become economically isolated. Research from the University of California found that car ownership is one of the strongest predictors of economic mobility. People with reliable transportation earn 20 to 30% more over their lifetimes than those without. They have access to better jobs, better education, better healthcare. When car manufacturers systematically eliminate affordable vehicles, they're not just making a business decision, they're creating social stratification. They're building a system where transportation, and therefore economic opportunity, is reserved for those who can afford £30,000 plus vehicles. And the manufacturers know this. They know exactly what they're doing. In internal documents and investor presentations, they talk about targeting high-income demographics and focusing on premium consumers. They've explicitly decided that low-income and middle-income customers are not their market anymore. This represents a fundamental betrayal of the automotive industry's 20th century promise that cars would be democratized, that everyone could afford personal transportation. Henry Ford famously said he wanted to build a car so affordable that his own workers could buy it. That was the Model T's whole purpose, democratizing transportation. For most of the 20th century, that ethos held. Cars became progressively more affordable, not less. By the 1970s and 80s, even working-class families could afford new cars. The 1990s and 2000s saw the peak of automotive affordability, dozens of models under $15,000, financing widely available, a thriving used market. That entire ecosystem has been deliberately dismantled in barely a decade. So where does this leave us? What happens when the bottom falls out of the automotive market permanently? We're already seeing the answer. People are holding onto cars longer. The average age of vehicles on the road in the UK is now 9.2 years, up from 7.8 years in 2015. In America, it's 12.5 years, up from 11.4 years. People are driving older, less safe, less efficient cars, longer, because they can't afford to replace them. This has environmental implications, safety implications, and economic implications that policymakers are completely ignoring. We're also seeing the rise of predatory financing. When people can't afford cars but desperately need them, they turn to subprime lenders charging 15 to 25% interest rates. They buy cars. At buy here. Pay here. Lotsta. Repossess vehicles. A moment a payment is missed. The Money Advice Trust reported that car finance debt problems in the UK increased by 47% between 2020 and 2024. People are drowning in unpayable car debt because the industry has made affordable cash purchases impossible. Meanwhile, manufacturers are posting record profits quarter after quarter. In 2024, the global automotive industry generated over $150 billion in net profit, the highest in history. They're making more money than ever by selling fewer cars at inflated prices to wealthier customers. From a shareholder perspective, this is brilliant. From a societal perspective, it's a disaster. We've allowed essential transportation to be transformed into a luxury good, and the consequences are only beginning to emerge. The only solution is intervention. Governments need to recognize that transportation is infrastructure, not just a consumer product. That means regulations requiring manufacturers to produce affordable vehicles as a condition of market access. It means dropping protectionist tariffs that block cheap cars from entering markets. It means antitrust enforcement to break up automotive oligopolies that coordinate on eliminating affordable options. And it means public investment in alternatives, mass transit, car sharing programs, mobility subsidies for low-income families.